opposition speaker to give a speech not exceeding 8 minutes. Here.
My time starts now. On the side opposition, we prefer a world whereas U.S. hegemony to a multipolar world because it is the most justified and stable in a globalizing world. So what I'll be doing for you today is I will be refuting everything the proposition team have said. I'll provide you with my own claim, whereas the U.S. hegemony is much, much more preferred in the globalization world we have today, economically and militarily, for any global citizen. And then I'll be providing you with impacts and historical examples of why multipolarization is bad for the economy and the entire world. So firstly, to refute their first point on the decreased risk of war, we see that simply wouldn't happen because, as the proposition have said, states are selfish and they want resources for themselves. So we see that this multipolarization will actually increase international tension between countries and which will result in wars internationally. See on our side of the house, we believe that U.S. hegemony will actually decrease the risk of war because wars wouldn't happen in the first place because it's so one-sided. I'll take you later. And then secondly, on their point about the U.S. is unfit for the representation of democracy, we see that it is actually the most fit because the U.S. is strong enough to maintain democracy on world stage, and they reflect the principle of democracy to its best. On their second speaker's point about neo-colonialism and new imperialism, we see that this is actually a preferred motion, not other debate motion about anything else. So we see that their third point doesn't even make any sense and doesn't make any statement in this debate. So and on their point about fundamental capitalism and competition between states provides growth for all countries, we see that U.S. hegemony is more likely to offer a freer market for businesses to actually have growth in the first place because states doesn't offer growth, businesses does. Yes, but you seem to disagree. William.
Thank you. So you'd like to talk about how with the United States there would be the most free economy in the world. However, aren't you aware that China is the most globalized economy in the world and how like America is more of a nationalized or national economy now?
Well, thank you very much. China actually is the most centralized form of government, both economically and militarily. So we see that U.S. will actually provide a free market because China simply doesn't have a free market in the first place. So I don't see where your point stands. So I'm moving on to my claim about why the U.S. hegemony is better in a globalizing world. Firstly, we see that multipolarity refers to the distribution of power in which more than two states have equally amount of military, cultural, financial, and economic influence, right? So we see that since countries and states compete for their own stake, as the proposition have stated, one country will try to win through economic, military, and economic power. See, so which means that in our world, on this case, so globalization is going to happen no matter what. States are interconnected through internet and trade, and states depend on each other more than ever. And we see that globalization, since it is inevitable, we see that U.S. hegemony is better for the world. This is because hegemony is better economically. As my partner have said, having one currency as the gold standard, such as the U.S. currency, we see that is more efficient since there is no trade going on no trade of currency between two countries, and no value and inefficiency is being lost in this case. We also see that free market is easier to access. For example, if I want to buy an iPhone in China, I don't have to trade my money, which means that the market is everywhere and everywhere. But you seem to disagree.
Do you truly think that, for example, Liberia's economy is benefiting off US's hegemonization?
Actually, Liberia, that's a very good point because the only reason it is having so much trouble is because of multipolarity, right? If the US has a hegemony, there wouldn't be military wars because the US is so one-sided, which I will talk in the next point. And then So that wouldn't be a problem in the first place. So since free market is easily accessed and there is a hegemony of the United States, we see that since the world and economy is built upon credit, hegemony provides the best financial security for any citizens in the entire world. So you don't have to worry about your country getting crushed by another country through competition, as the proposition is suggesting. And we see that trade wars will not happen and less likely to happen because countries are becoming dependent on each other. So we see that economically, U.S. economy is better for the world, and I'll provide some examples to such. And on the other side, we see that militarily, the U.S. is also so powerful that wars are less likely to happen. And as the more world is connected, whereas the U.S. is hegemonical power, the better it is for the world. So let's take a few examples of multipolar world that the proposition is talking about. See, let's say in 1917, we see European powers such as France, Britain, and Germany are roughly in power. It is considered a multipolar world in 1970. So what are the results of a multipolar world in 1970? We see in World War I, where the military race began because countries are so similar, right? There was little to no economic growth, and much of the money are spent on war, and we're not even talking about millions of the deaths spent and wasted on the Western Front. And then again, a multipolar world achieved again in 1941, right? Where World War II happened between European Nazis, the United States, and the communist Russia. And the result was World War II and genocide and murder of Jews. And then we see in 1950s, multipolar again. So the USSR and communist states versus the United States and democratic world. So we see this competition resulted in nuclear race and almost resulted in the end of the world. So from these points, we see that multipolar has only negative effects on the entire world because of they provide wars, economic crashes, famine, and political unrest. Now, therefore, from 1980s to 2010, the US had a complete hegemony on the entire world, right? So let's see what happened from 1980 until 2010. Countries over the world spend a lot of money on the same thing to improve the world. There was global aid support, United Nations, NAFTA trade for Mexico, EU for the entire world. And then we see that the currency, United States currency, has benefited the entire stock market and raised the standard of living. Then in terms of wars, colonial imperial conflict were reduced by 100% because of U.S. hegemony, right? Civil conflicts and wars were reduced by 97% in the past 30 years, and we see that the state-based conflicts were reduced by negative 70%. So we see the hegemonical world is characterized by growth, economic boom, and little to no conflict. So let's weight the two different sides. In a multipolar world, we see that there's only conflict, destabilization, and useless competition. However, on our side of the house, we prefer a world that has hegemony, which is stable, which provides good economy, and less conflicts for global citizens. Now, therefore, because there is increasing inevitable globalization, we prefer a world where U.S. has a hegemony. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I thank the speaker for their remarks, and I call upon the first opposition speaker to give a